I think now we can start sculpting, well, getting into more details, merging parts of the sculpts over here and, just moving forward. Now, obviously, for the blackout, as I said, we could have stopped earlier and we can still continue. I mean, I can make the fee a bit bigger. I can, I don't know, grab all of these in edit mode and, oops, there we go. And then maybe rotate it a bit like so, just so that it look closer to the pose we have over here. But actually, I'm just gonna grab this and scale it upwards a bit. All right, but I think it's more than enough. All right, we're gonna move ahead and start sculpting the torso. So for educational purposes, I'm going to try and split parts and sculpt parts separately so that you can kind of focus on each part separately and learn from them each. But generally speaking, when I sculpt, I go back and forth between all parts and keep things around the same level of sculpting details. And that's usually how you want to sculpt, but there are no rules. You really end up sculpting the way you want to do and the way you feel comfortable doing. So again, I'll try to focus on separate parts, but don't be surprised if I go back and forth to clean things up. And once we sculpt the basic shapes, we could go back and refine everything together. So let's start with the torso. Okay, so for the torso, I'm going to include the shoulders, the neck, all of that, because it's I find it easier to connect them right away. And yeah, let's see what's going on over here. All right, so if I go to the, let's see, torso drawings that I did over here. So the drawings are just some general, don't take them too literal, but where the muscles will probably be. I'm showing most of the major muscles, not every single muscle there is out there. There are smaller muscles I might not show. There are deeper muscles that you don't really see on the form. The ones I'm showing really affect the form. And then some, secondary ones that don't affect it that much. Also, I'm not, with the drawings, I'm not really showing the tendons or the exact form of the muscle per se. I mean, in some cases I do, but in most cases I don't. Just see this as the form that you'll get because of what's underneath, right? So for each of these drawings, you're going to have the names up on the left over here. You can look at them if because I'm going to say the names, but if you've never heard of them or you've never read them before, you might not really catch on the names. But here's the thing. I don't want to focus too much on the anatomical terminology. I mean, it makes it easier to remember the muscles when you know the names, when you know how to call it. But even though I'm going to call this pectoralis major, it's just a chest muscle. I mean, you can remember it like that if you want to, or you can push your knowledge in anatomy and try to really learn the anatomical forms. That's really up to you, but it's not the purpose of this course, right? So let's get started with the torso. So first things first, the chest. So I'm going to apply the mirror modifier over here. So if I click on this or Control A, I can apply this, right? And let's see, what else? We have the shoulders. I'll apply this as well with Control A. I'll put the mouse over here, Control A. And do we have any other objects that we can mirror? Yep, there you go. So Control A for the serratus interior. Okay, I think that does it. Oh, we have the clavicle as well. Control A. Okay, so I'm gonna grab all of these muscles and merge them together. Now I'm sculpting with remesh. You can sculpt with whatever method you want. Again, not a purpose of this course. It's not the sculpting methods, but more, anatomy, how to sculpt form, talk about all of that stuff, right? So by grabbing one and then grabbing other forms over here with shift, right? So I'm just clicking on them. I'm gonna grab the neck, the clavicle. Yep, that pretty much, oh, actually the shoulders as well, the deltoids. Okay, that sums it up for the torso parts that I want to show you. Actually, well, the pelvic area as well. And maybe, I'm wondering if I should include this as well. Maybe not for now. All right, so I'm gonna grab all of these muscles over here, all of these part of bodies, and use Control J to join them, right? Because I'm going to sculpt with remesh, that's how you do it. So Control J, you join them, and then you go to sculpt mode, and if I scroll to here to remesh, I have it set at 0.05 for starters. I can just hit remesh and it will merge everything. Again, that really depends on the sculpting techniques you're using. If you're going with, for example, dynamic topology, then it will require a different way to merge things, right? Because if I want to sculpt with dynamic topology and I activate it over here, it doesn't connect. You're gonna have to connect it with the Boolean modifier. Hopefully you already know all of this, right? But I'm going a bit too far from subject here. It's not the purpose of the course. So I'm gonna go to sculpt mode, remesh over here, or I think it's Control R, the hotkey. So if I hover over this, let's see, does it say? Yes, Control R shortcuts. Okay, so Control R, that's good. And it's good to know the shortcuts so that you can just do it without having to go through all of these steps. Make sure that the symmetry is activated, and now I can smooth things out. So, so far I've sculpted without using remesh, so I didn't really show the sculpting brushes over here. I'm just gonna open the sculpting brushes so that you can see what brushes I'm using, but you can see them on the left as well, and you see all of the options I have. But depending on the Blender version you have, the sculpting brushes you have, things might be a bit different for you. Okay, so with Shift, I'm going to smooth, right? So when I hit Shift, it doesn't show it over here, but I'm using the smooth brush by using Shift. Okay, so I'm just gonna slightly smooth all of the muscles, and you can see how it's nicely connects to each other, right? Which is why we were paying attention to the form of the character block at the form of every sphere that we had over here. Because once I connect them and just smooth them out, kind of does a lot of the job for me, right? Okay, very nice. I didn't add the sternocleidomastoid muscle over here. This is the neck muscle in the character block out, which is why we have this huge part that's missing. We'll just sculpt it in right away. So you can use whatever brush you want. Again, here I'm going to use the draw brush ever so slightly to quickly create this form over here and then smooth things out. And I'll switch between brushes all the time, by the way. I don't really care that much which brush I'm using as long as it's getting the job done. And I don't play around with a lot of brushes either, right? Just to brush to add form, to remove form, to crease in form with the crease brush, to smooth things out, just a few brushes. It makes just life easier. Okay, so with the crease brush, I can basically draw in the forms, right? I can carve in the forms like this, right? So here I'm just doing the form of the thorax, but you can carve in the form of the abs, abdominals, right? So you can notice that the abs are around the middle of the lower chest over here. Again, every human being is different. There'll be slight differences between every person, or bigger differences depending on many things, but don't take things too literal on how I'm sculpting the character. And I'm not paying too much attention to how the sculpt is over here. I'm just, I'm adding abs over here. I'm not trying to get exactly the same form of abs we have over here. All right, so I'm just, with the clay brush over here, I'm just quickly adding in, bulking in the abs, or with the inflate brush, you can do the same thing. So this muscle over here is called the rectus abdominis, by the way, just the anatomical name for it. All right, so this line over here is the navel, right? So with the crease brush, I'll just quickly indicate it so that I don't forget that that's where it is, because here the abs are going a bit too low. I'm just gonna raise it or recrease this area with a crease brush and then smooth things out just so that I remember where it is. Okay. And you can see I'm keeping things really light, right? With, at least in the current version I'm using, with 0.05 for the torso here. It's enough to carve in some details, but not to go crazy with them. So it's still easy to actually use the grab brush and move things around. All right, so I want to, let's see, maybe work a bit on the width over here, right? Add in some volume for the external oblique, which is this over here, and for the serratus anterior, which is this over here. All right. So with the inflate brush, I could attempt to do that with this brush for now. Right, I'm just slightly adding in form over here. And while I'm doing it, I'm just turning around all the time, right? When I turn around over here, it kind of shows that this area is missing some volume, right? So just pay attention to every form. As a sculptor, this is a very important skill. I meant to say pay attention to every angle, not every form, but you know, you get the point. Okay. So I'm smoothing things out. I'll add in some volume here for the external oblique. Don't forget, when you're sculpting, you're not really just sculpting muscle, you're sculpting the skin, the fat. So things kind of merge together, right? They, unless the human being, the person has a very, very low fat percentage, I mean, ridiculously low, you won't see every single separation of the muscle like you might see in stylized sculpts, right? It's just it's an artistic choice, but not how it actually works in real life. But again, if a person's very, very ripped, a very low fat percentage, then yeah, you might see quite a lot of separations of muscles, especially when that person's moving around or doing some actions. But also, if a person is very ripped, then you'll see it in the face as well, generally speaking. You know, it's going to be really thin face, the jaw, the cheekbones will really show. You know, you can't have someone, well, generally speaking, someone that looks, well, that has quite a round face and then a really ripped body, right? But I keep saying this for a reason. Generally speaking, every person's different. There are exceptions to the rule. Anyways. All right. So, I mean, without doing much work over here, it's already starting to look like a torso, like a proper body. And that's because we did a good job with the character block out. All right, so for the chest, I didn't really talk much about it since the form was already there, but pay attention to how, generally speaking, it goes downwards like this. It has this curve and then goes back upwards to under the shoulders, right? To the humerus, again, which is the bone of the arm over here. All right, so this line over here is where the nipples are. It's a head width. Length, I mean the length of the head, if you put it and you rotate it over here, that's usually where it would be, but not a hard rule either, right? Okay, so I'm pushing in this inwards because if I'm going to consider the nipples to be here, it seems to be a bit too far from the shoulders. So by pushing things inwards a bit, it will look better. Okay. So the separation of the chest that we have over here, again, depends on the individual, how much it shows, how well their chest is developed. So it doesn't have to be too apparent, right? But the chest, it attaches to, let's see, a part of where it attaches to is the sternum, which is this bone over here, right? Which is why you could see the separation in between. Okay. So the curve of it going downwards is a bit too much for my taste. I'm just going to push this downwards a bit. Very nice. And look at it from the side. Now, this ab over here is going a bit too forward compared to the other ones. I mean, why not? It could be possible. But again, artistic choice to change that, to level it up with the other parts of the abs, right, around the same level of bulkiness. But I believe I've seen individuals that, I mean, I've seen a lot of people with many, many different forms. So that's to say that we're all different in our own unique way. All right, so with the crease brush, ever so slightly, I'm going to indicate here the triangular area I was talking about earlier, this one over here. The separation between the chest muscle and the deltoid, which is the yellow muscle over here, right? Well, you know, the muscle is not actually yellow, just in case. It's just the color I chose for it over here. Okay. All right, and then I'm smoothing out the deltoids a bit, giving it a more organic, nice form. All right, like so. And I've seen individuals that have shoulders here on the side that are quite developed, the front parts of the shoulders that would go really outwards, and you'd see less of this area of the chest, and people with less developed shoulders from this area, and it will look more like this. So again, every person is different. All right, I'm gonna grab the arms here, even though we're not really working on the arms. I'm just gonna push it inwards a bit, since I want to work on the shoulders in this area. There you go. And yeah, looks good. Okay. So by turning around, I'm going to focus a bit more on the trapezius muscle. So again, it's this one over here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to remove the proportions for now for this character on the left so that we can better see the muscles. All right. So for the trapezius, I'll just use the clay brush over here and just slightly add in form. I think by default Blender has Auto Smooth activated for clay. I play around with this. Sometimes I remove it, sometimes I add it. Basically just smooths out the sculpt at the same time. So it's up to you if you want that effect or not, depending on what you're going for. All right. So you can see I indicated the actual form going down to here, even though we didn't do that when sculpting the character block out, right? But it doesn't have to be too prominent, right? Don't forget muscles, and you know, skin, fat tissues kind of intertwines and connects to each other, and things just fade out. You know, you don't see the actual separation of every single muscle. That's not how it works. All right, so keep in mind over here, you do have this scapula, right? So if I go to the skeleton over here, there's this scapula bone over here with muscles attached to it and everything. So it's bound to affect the form of the back as well, right? Oop, remove the skeleton, okay. All right, so here I'm bulking up some of the muscles that you see over here. Now a bunch of them. I'm not gonna ask you to remember all of them. I mean, you could, it's better. The more you know about something, the easier it is to create. But basically you have the rhomboid, well, a very small part of it over here that you see, the rhomboid muscle. You have the infraspinatus, the teres minor, and the teres major over here. Now, realistically speaking, if you take a look at back reference, the back doesn't really have the exact forms you're seeing here, again, because things kind of mix in together and there's skin and fat and everything. So what I like to do is just bulk things out a bit with whatever brush, like the inflate, and just slightly add bumps to indicate muscles if the individual's really muscular and ripped, right? But I wouldn't like actual cuts in the muscles like that. That wouldn't look right. And then we have a very major one over here, which is called the latissimus dorsi or dorsi muscle. Not really sure how that's pronounced. Yeah, basically it kind of goes under the arm over here. So what I'm going to do is inflate this area to indicate it. All right. And you have the spine. So I'm going to just crease in here the middle. You can see it's inwards and goes outwards, right? Because there are, as I mentioned before, there are deeper muscles that you don't see that are covered up by other muscles, but they can still affect the form in a sense. Okay. So you have a spine muscle over here, right? Bam. And then I can add some volume for the external oblique, the blue one. Very nice. Okay, so right now the area I want to work on is the one that looks that really needs the most work, which is right over here. You can see how there's this really dip in form that isn't realistic. We need to add in some form of the shoulders and also the muscles over here. So I'm gonna just inflate things and smooth them out a bit, kind of make the shoulders mix in with the rest, right? All right. Now the trapezius muscle, the red one, can be quite bulky in this area for some individuals. All right. There we go. And if I look at it from the back over here, we can definitely push this area a bit closer to the shoulders. And if you're feeling like a really useful way to kind of remember the muscles to draw them out with a crease brush and then smoothing things out, right? Like so. And then I could just like add some more clay or brush in this area and then smooth things out. And just, you know, pay attention to every side when you're doing it, because you might overdo it and make, for example, this area too bulky if you add in too much over here, and you might not notice it on the back side over here. Okay. Looking real good. All right, I'm gonna remove the torso drawing of the muscles that I did, so that you can see the forms a bit more. Okay, so here we have one of the column vertebra. Hold on, let me just show you with the skeleton so that you can see what's going on. So one of the bones here, by the way, this is a really general shape. That's not exactly how each one of them looks like. Quite the opposite. They look very different, and they don't all look the same. I just duplicated them and quickly changed their form. But basically, one of the bones over here, it goes really outwards, and you get this neck bone, which I believe to be the seventh vertebral column of the neck. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It should be this one right over here, and basically gives this little bump. This is just a little tip, by the way. It shows more in some individuals and less in other individuals. So I'm going to remove this over here. Just keep in mind, somewhere around this area, you have this bump. That's what I'm trying to say. You have this bone that shows, right? So a lot of the skeleton bone does not show on the human form because of all the skin and muscles, but some areas it does, and these are just bony landmarks that you could add in and make things look a bit more realistic. Whoops, I was trying to carve in. Okay. All right. So for the front here, looking at it right now, I could definitely work on the side actually. Here. So on the side, I'm gonna put the muscles back so that you can see what I'm talking about. We have some of the latissimus dorsi over here. I can crease in, not too much, you don't want to overdo it, but just crease a bit to kind of separate that from the serratus anterior, and maybe add in some volume right over here with the inflate brush. Right? Okay. So looking at the torso from all sides, seems like we got to a good part. Let's just take a look at the character, the difference between both of them. Looking pretty good, I'd say. We can definitely work on the form a bit more for the chest and for other part of the body. But for details, for refinements, I do want to keep that for later in the course. Instead, I want to focus more or move further with other muscles and keep this at a lower amount of details for now, and see what we can do later on when we want to refine. All right. And I think for the abs, it's even though I did indicate them quite a bit over here just to show you them, but it's nice to kind of have it merge in with each other. Skin-wise, you can see over here, it doesn't have to be very obvious with a crease brush, and it looks more realistic that way in most cases, obviously. As I said, each individual is different. How, you know, the fat percentage really plays a big role on the form of the muscles that are visible to the human eye. All right. So the hips over here, we're going to connect the legs later on. It's around over here. So if I turn on the proportions, again, that's where you're going to get the pelvic bone over here, right? Which we can definitely work on on the sculpt we're working with right now. You can see the legs really low. So if I grab the legs, even though we're not really working on the legs right now, I can just push it upwards and improve it drastically quite fast just by doing this little change. All right. Okay. Let's see. Let's just go back to the shoulders over here. I'm just going to scrape in, refine it just quickly. And for the most part, I'm content with where we're at right now for the torso. All right, looking real good.